Hey everybody, welcome to virtual HUMA 118 today. We are going to talk about the difference of acoustic and electric sound and instruments and kind of go through all of those things. So go ahead and pull up your notes, your guided notes that are on my Ivy Learn or Canvas, whatever. Notes, acoustic versus electric. I'll pull up mine so I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so... No. Okay. So the definition of acoustic sound or instruments or whatever is music that is produced without the use of electronic amplification or electric instruments. So go ahead and take a second to type that out. So any music or sound that's produced with natural instruments. I mean, no instrument is like, I guess your singing voice is a pretty natural instrument, but okay, leave it up. Feel free to pause, go back, whatever you need to do. There's the next one. So acoustic instruments that exist, we have acoustic guitar, piano, literally all the instruments you play in the band room that do not get plugged in, like flute, clarinet, saxophone, trumpet, French horn, trombone, baritone, tuba, timpani, mallets, all those. Those are all acoustic instruments. So literally just write down instruments. So we'll listen to this example of acoustic music. By the way, this is going to be your listening journal also. So take a minute and pull up the listening journal 5. That's the assignment that's due. So this is listening journal number 5. I'll give you a second. If it doesn't let you do 2 at the same time, I will post this video extra just in case, so that you can listen to it again. But Okay, so that was Waltz number 2 by Dmitri Shostakovich, Romantic era composer, by the way, and it was performed by the Carillon Wind Quintet. So, all right, I would ask about any questions, but I can't answer them because I'm on a screen. So, electric sound and instruments. Sound or music that is created through electronic instruments or amplification. Now, it's a little tricky because the last one technically used electronic microphones to record, but if you were in a live setting, like, there would be no amplification necessarily. So, it's still acoustic instruments. Like, the instrument's sound is not being created by electronics. So, that's the definition of electric sound. Think about examples of electronic instruments. Electronic instruments, electric guitar. Now that's an important distinction, that it's electric guitar, not just guitar. Keyboard, synthesizer, iwi. Does anyone know what an iwi might be? That is an electronic wind instrument. We'll watch a little video of it. There are electric violins and cellos, electric drum machines, theremin. That's one of my favorites. So we kind of get more into like acoustic instruments. Like I don't know, we could dive really deep into the history of acoustic instruments, but that's also like that's what we do all day. But yeah, we're gonna get a little bit more into electronic instruments. So one of the earliest examples of an electronic instrument is the telemonium, invented in 1897, and the theremin, invented in 1919. And then one of the earliest examples of electronic music was written by Pierre Schaeffer, his Etude aux chemins de fer, in 1948, and it was created by splicing and manipulating tape-recorded music. So someone like recorded live music and took that recording and like literally cut and pasted together to manipulate it and change it and to make the first like electronic music. So that's who Pierre Schaeffer is. So that was the earliest. Okay. This is a theremin. It's one of my favorite instruments.
The theremin is an electronic musical instrument. It was invented in 1919 by Russian physicist Leon Theremin. Besides its unusual appearance, the theremin is also unique in that it's played without being touched. The theremin typically consists of a box with two metal antennas which create an electromagnetic field. The musician stands in front of the instrument and moves his hands in the proximity of the two antennas, which forms a capacitor between his hands and the antennas. The capacitance of the electromagnetic field varies by the distance between the player and the instrument. The upright antenna controls the pitch. When the right hand approaches the antenna, the pitch gets higher. When the hand moves away from it, the pitch gets lower again. Small, rapid movements of the right hand can create vibrato. The loop antenna controls the volume. Approaching the antenna makes the volume softer, so the left hand is responsible for dynamics and articulation. There is no physical contact with the instrument. Playing the theremin in a precise melodic way requires much practice. Pitch control is especially challenging, as there's no guidance, no keys or fingerboard positions. The player has to rely on his ear, and he can only correct the pitch when it is off. Skilled players who control the combination of movements precisely can achieve complex and expressive performances.
All right. That's annoying. Oh, that's all. That's why. Okay. We are going to watch this video for a little bit to talk about electronic dance music.
Let's go first.
And to answer those last couple of questions about like when is the earliest example of musique concrete?
Journey together, one date at a time. Tell us here. Let's start simple. What's the first EDM song ever? It's a common custom to consider Kraftwerk as the pioneers of EDM music, as many people define the homonym album, released in 1970, as the first EDM album, although the real first EDM song was released in 1968, a couple of years prior, and it's called Oscillations by Silver Apples. In fact, even Moby, the famous American producer, said that his friend Simon, one of the members of the group Silver Apples, invented dance music. Silver Apples was an American electronic rock band formed in 1967, and they were among the first to introduce electronic sounds into rock. The first electronic music, though, could be dated way back in 1897 with the invention of the telharmonic. The telharmonic was a sort of electric organ that worked by combining simple sounds through a technique called additive synthesis, which basically works by combining sine waves to create more complex sounds. Fun fact, it was originally meant to be used to play music through a telephone line. Another key moment in the birth of electronic music is musique concrète. I'm sorry to all the French-speaking people right now. This was a new way of making music invented by Pierre Schaeffer in the 1940s, and it worked by using pre-recorded sounds instead of traditional instruments. However, when magnetic tape became available, he decided to switch to using tape loops, with which he could not only repeat sounds, but also change them electronically. This kind of technique was also used.
So, one of the earliest examples of musique concrete is Pierre Schaeffer's etude, and that was in 1948. So he started doing that. So that answers the question number 6. Questions 7 and 8, that is kind of on your own. Like, you can use examples that talk about in this video, or you can use things that we've talked about before, or just like examples in your own life. Like, if you're someone who listens to electronic dance music, then that's up to you. But I'm gonna let this video play because I think it's interesting, and just kind of a history of electronic music and all that stuff. So enjoy, finish up the guided notes, finish up that listening journal, and then I'll post both of those videos. Yeah, good luck. Let me know if you have questions.
By David Derbyshire and Ron Rainer in 1963, when they composed the first electronic theme song for television, the Doctor Who theme music. Every single note was made by working with the tape of a recording of a black string, some test on oscillators, and pure white noise. To think that she managed to do all that, and BBC still didn't credit her enough for her work. By the 50s and 60s, radio producers were using musique concrète techniques regularly. For example, BBC used a show called The Cook Show, which used this kind of collage technique. It had a big impact on many electronic and experimental musicians that came later. For example, I don't know, the Beatles used this kind of technique in their track Revolutionary, which was released in 1968. Another group influenced by the show were Pink Floyd. They were among the first artists to make EDM popular, as many people define their albums, like for example, The Dark Side of the Moon, to be highly influential in the formation of the EDM scene. Another music genre that is considered to be a predecessor of EDM is Jamaican dub music. It was born in the late 60s and 70s, and it mainly focused on strong rhythms, broken up vocals and melodies, and echo-like sound effects, all while using techniques similar to, once again, musique concrète. The producers were also one of the first to introduce reverb and delay effects, and the most common way to achieve it at the time was by using the Roland space echo, a type of tape delay. Although it's not the first time effects like these were used. In fact, the first reverb effects were produced in the 1930s, and they were obtained by playing recordings in reverberating spaces and then re-recording the sound. The first room reverb was created in 1947 by Bill Putnam, the founder of Universal Audio, who made the band play their tracks and record them in the studio bathroom. Yeah, sometimes the weirdest ideas make the biggest inventions. However, there are other types of reverbs called plate reverbs. And they were first invented in 1957. Companies wanted to make reverb easier for smaller studios, and the best way to do it was the EMT 140 reverberation unit. It used a big metal sheet in a wooden box with a transducer and a pickup attached to it. It made great reverb sounds, and you could also change how long they lasted thanks to the motorized damping. But at the same time it was very heavy, almost 217 kilos, and very expensive, so it was originally considered to be an elite technique. This particular machine was commissioned by John Lennon, the Beatles singer, in 1969. Or well, to be more precise, 4 of them were commissioned, and one of them is also on sale right now, and it costs almost $75,000. Now, tape loop wasn't just used to make fancy sound manipulation, but also to create the first type of delay, the tape delay. In fact, by changing the length of the tape loop and by adjusting the playback on the recording heads, musicians could control how the echo sounded. Once again, Pierre Schaeffer was one of the pioneers of this technique in the 1940s, but it was soon improved by an American producer called Sam Phillips, who in 1954 created the slapback echo effect, a delay of 60 to 250 milliseconds with minimum feedback. Kind of like this, sending the sound from the tape recorder's playback head to its record head. This technique thickened sound and was characteristic of 1950s rock and roll vocals, especially present in Elvis Presley's tracks. Among the first proper echo machines that they could call back then was the Echosonic, a portable guitar amplifier which had a tape echo built in, and it was first built in 1953 but then gained popularity through country music but especially rock and roll. Now let's take a step back from music production and focus on EDM in general. Hip-hop was also a huge influence in the birth of EDM. This genre was born in 1973 thanks to DJ Cool Herc, a Jamaican-American DJ who hosted parties that reportedly made the hip-hop culture extremely popular. He developed a technique in the mid-70s which consisted in playing 2 copies of the same disc on 2 separate turntables, but only the break section, so that when one break in the first disc ended, the same loop would play on the other disc from the beginning. This technique eventually became what we call now breakbeat. This technique was also made possible by the direct drive turntables, which are the type of turntables that are still being used by almost every DJ in the world. They were invented in 1969 by an engineer at Matsushita, a company that you might know more by the name of Panasonic. Of course, though, we cannot talk about EDM in the 70s without talking about disco music. One of the first disco songs, well, one of the first songs in general to use a drum machine, was Family Affair, released by Sly and Family Stone in 1971. Another huge disco producer was Video, an extremely influential figure in the early British disco scene, with synthesizers in many of his songs in the 70s. Although they weren't as played by British mainstream media, they started gaining some traction in underground clubs. In 1977, Don Summer released I Feel Love, the first high-energy track, as well as the first disco hit that skyrocketed in popularity and that had a completely synthesized backing track. It was produced by none other than Giorgio Moroder and Pete Paulette. If we're talking about EDM history, Moroder is a must quote. He is considered to be the father of disco thanks to his implementation of synthesizers in his works. For example, his album Father of My Son, released in 1972, where he used the groundbreaking Moog synthesizer, a modular synthesizer invented by Robert Moog in 1964, and basically the first commercial synthesizer available. The subsequent models are still being used in today's music. Moroder was also one of the pioneers of synth-pop, a subgenre of pop music that features synths as main instrument. It was already present in progressive rock and also in Kraftwerk's krautrock. In 1971, a synth soundtrack was used in the British movie A Clockwork Orange. A year later instead came out one of the most famous synth-pop songs ever, Popcorn, made by the jazz musician Stan Free under the pseudonym Hot Butter. It was a cover of the homing song made by Gershon Kingsley, and it was made by using a Moog synthesizer. On the same year, Isao Tomita, a Japanese composer, released an album called Electric Samurai Switched on Rock, and it was essentially a compilation of electronic covers of popular songs like Imagine, Let It Be, or The Sounds of Silence. Synth-pop is also called techno-pop in some cases. This term was born in 1978 when Yuzo Agi, a Japanese critic, used it while reviewing Kraftwerk's The Man Machine. Another band that was really influential in the scene was Yellow Magic Orchestra, a band that formed in 1978 in Tokyo and is also considered to be influential for genres like J-pop, electro, and techno. Their songs were also among the first to feature sampling techniques. In fact, their surprise hit computer game released in 1978 featured a chop of Martin Dennis' Firecracker and some sounds from Space Invaders and Circus to notorious arcade games. Synthesizer-based music became popular in 1979, especially after Gary Numan's Cars became the #1 hit in the UK singles chart and brought to the rise of artists like Depeche Mode and Eurythmics in the Western scene, whereas Yellow Magic Orchestra inspired synth-pop bands like P-Model, Hikashu, and Plastics, all formed between 1976 and 1979. Also, polyphonic synthesizers, which were synthesizers able to play more than one note at the same time, were becoming cheaper, and along with the rise of MTV, established in 1981, meant that some British synth-pop artists like Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet, respectively formed in 1978 and 1979, would become more popular in the United States as well. In the early 1980s, EDM also saw a huge breakthrough thanks to the birth of the Roland TR-808, which became one of the most influential sounds in the dance scene, both when Marvin Gaye released his song Sexual Healing in 1982, which was the first song that became a hit and also featured an 808 as the main instrument, and also thanks to Afrika Bambaata's Planet Rock, a track still from 1982, which made this type of sound popular in the dance floors. Quite unexpectedly, the TR-808 became discontinued in just 3 years because electronic music wasn't yet mainstream, and also they couldn't find the semiconductors that were essential for the synthesizer to work. Well, it wasn't a complete failure, I mean, it still sold 12,000 units, and also it was immediately succeeded by the TR-99 in 1983. It was the first Roland drum machine to use both samples for symbols and analog synthesis for other sounds. And it's got a more aggressive sound than the boomy 808. Fun fact, they were both initially sold at the same price of $1,195. But whereas in today's money, the 808 cost $4,419, the 99 cost just $3,656. Talk about inflation. However, the disco scene started getting some backlash, as there has even been a riot in Chicago called the Disco Demolition Night. It was a Major League Baseball promotion which invited fans to bring their own disco records to a game between the Chicago White Sox and the Detroit Tigers, and then between games they would eventually be blown out of the field. This was a way to celebrate the decline of disco music that rock fans often described as overly commercial and inauthentic. However, the audience of that game wasn't 20,000 people like they hoped, but 50,000. There were so many people more interested in this protest than in the game that when the explosion occurred, writers rushed onto the field to celebrate, and there had been so many damages to the field that the game had to be forfeited. This event was a significant date for the decline of disco, and especially for the birth of new genres like New Wave in 1980. It's a genre that evolved from punk rock and had pop and electronic elements, although it later became an umbrella term for all popular music styles of the time. Some New Wave artists were, for example, Duran Duran, that I already mentioned before, but also One, the British duo formed in 1981, incredibly famous for their song Last Christmas. Come on, it's basically one of the songs that doesn't get out of your head during November and December. Speaking of, it's almost Christmas now. Be careful, Christmas songs are about to defrost and play on the radio non-stop. In the early 80s, another genre that also became incredibly famous was electro, also called electro-funk, which was a fusion of synth-pop, funk, and boogie. For example, one of the earlier electro songs was Knock by Warp 9, released in 1982. And it's during that time that house music was born, thanks to the Chicago-American DJ team Hot Mix 5 formed in 1981, who played different styles of EDM at the radio, making it more popular than it ever was, with DJs making their own edits of their favorite song. The first proper house song is considered to be On and On by Jesse Saunders in 1984 because it had a lot of early house elements, for example the 808 drum machine, the 303 bass synthesizer, as well as simple minimal vocals. Some other sources though describe Music is the Key, released by J.M. Silk in 1985, to be the first actual house track. One of the first tracks that instead gave Chicago House the first glimmer of success in Europe was House Nation by Housemaster Boys and the Rude Boys of House, and this, along with many other house tracks, made its way into the pop charts. Okay, I'm sorry for leaving you here, I know there is a lot more to talk about, but we'll resume next week right where we left off. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Ciao!
All right, hopefully that was informative and hopefully you got your work done. Have a great day and I'll see you when I come back.